Hey peers, welcome back to the Modern Myths Podcast. I'm Vince Ventura, Artistic Director of 12 Peers Theater, and your host for the Modern Myths Podcast. This week, we're joined by Broadway veteran and Billboard AC Top 100 recording artist Leslie Becker. Leslie's going to tell us a little bit about how she found success, some tips and tricks that you can put into place to make your own career a little bit better, and also she's offering an exclusive discount on her book, The Organized Actor. You're not going to want to miss it. And now, let's jump right into my interview with Leslie Becker. Hey peers, I am on the line with Leslie Becker of Broadway, national tours, and now the Billboard AC Top 100 and Hot AC 100. I thought we'd sit down with Leslie today and talk a little bit about her past, see if there's any nuggets of wisdom that we might be able to glean from her, and hear a generally interesting life story as an artist. So welcome, Leslie. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Vince. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, why don't we start off talking a little bit about your background, any educational highlights, or, just give me a brief summary of what you've been able to accomplish.
Sure. Well, it's funny because I kind of came into the performing world in probably a different way than most people enter it. I always really had a very practical, grounded sense, and I never really thought that you could make a living as a performer. I thought that it was just something I wanted as a hobby. And it took me a long time to realize that it is a viable profession, and not only viable, but an extremely important one in the world, because I believe that artists create the light and the energy and the good that is in the world. And so when I finally came to that realization and literally closed the doors to my business life and said, I want to be a performer 24/7, that's what I want to do, that's when everything opened up. So I'm a firm believer in not only being true to your heart is speaking, but to speak it out loud. And it really, truly, the moment that I committed to it and said, no, I want that for my career, is when everything started to happen. So whatever background you're coming from, if you've always had that inside of you to be an artist of any kind, start pursuing it. That's something that we all have as children, that we are born artists, and then somehow society or school teachers or whatever kind of shuts that down on us sometimes. But if you have it in your heart, you got to keep doing it.
I think that is spot on. Something weird happens in your brain whenever you make that commitment and say it out loud. It's almost like your subconscious is working on your behalf.
Totally.
Like 24/7.
Yeah, your subconscious and the universe too. When the universe doesn't really know what you want, it doesn't know what to give you. And the minute you get so clear about it, then all these doors start opening for you. So it's very exciting.
I'm really glad we're touching on this early in our talk here. I have to say to all of our listeners, something that I've said to you before, but your book, The Organized Actor, was the first introduction to goal setting formal goal setting that I ever experienced. I mean, we all have dreams, but without a timeline or a due date, those are just dreams. They're not goals. And the things that you're saying here, I think, are reflected in some of your goal setting workshops, your coaching, and in your book, The Organized Actor.
Yes. I mean, I have a basic philosophy, Vince, and that is, I think there are people who go around saying what they want to do, and then there's people who actually do what they say. And the only difference between those two people is that the doers never doubt that something is possible, and they go out and do it. And so whenever I'm working with people, or within my books, I always say that I think everybody knows what they want down to the nth detail, and we're just too afraid to say it. Either we don't believe we can really get it, or we see where we are right now and we look at where we want to be and we have no idea how to get there. Or there's those people who say, oh, well, I can get all of that, but then when I get everything I want, then what? Sometimes the idea of success is scarier than failure. But truly, until you decide what you want, believe it's possible, and go out and do it, you're going to be kind of trapped until you make that decision. And once you decide those three things, then you're free to go out and do what you want to do.
I think that's spot on. And I think that the tools that you give actors and artists in general, let them treat themselves more like a business and less like an artist, while still maintaining that artistic outlet, facilitating that artistic outlet. What other kind of categories does The Organized Actor cover? Because I think you'll say it better than I can.
I think of The Organized Actor as like a day planner for the actor. So it has everything from a whole goal setting section to a place to store your income and expenses, a place to keep track of all the people you meet, a place to log your auditions. So it really is, a way to keep your whole career in one place. And I think that's really important because I think a lot of times with artists of all kinds, our minds are a little more maybe scattered or on a lot of different things. And so having one place where you can put everything in your career in one place is really, really important. It's funny because some people have said, why haven't you made this an online situation? And honestly, I did go down that venture and that fell apart a little bit a couple of years ago. But I've always maintained that there's something about writing something down in a book in physical form that makes it more real. And I find that people who still have an actual written book for a calendar are people who are less likely to miss an appointment because there's something visceral that happens with writing things down as opposed to typing them where you're not, your body and your fingers are not experiencing what you're writing down. You're just tapping things. And there's still so many people who appreciate that it's simply in book form.
There's an accountability to it because it's really easy to drag an appointment on Google to another day.
Absolutely.
But it's in ink, you're accountable.
Very true. Like when you say, I'm going to work out at 4 p.m. and you've written that in your calendar, it's harder to erase that when it's, written down.
The Organized Actor had kind of an interesting birth, did it not? There was like an interesting story behind it with you walking into the drama bookstore. Am I correct?
Yeah, it was actually Samuel French Bookstore in Los Angeles. So yes, I'm originally from LA, and the whole Organized Actor, it's been around now for 24 years, which is just incredible to me. And when I did start it, basically I had created this little day planner for myself, and a fellow actor saw me writing in it and said, "What are you doing? And what is that?" And I said, "Oh, I just put it together for myself." And he was like, "That's a really good idea. I should do that." And in that moment, it was just one of those lightning bolt moments. And I thought, well, shoot, if he could use that, maybe other people could too. And this is a true story. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I called Samuel French Bookstore and just said to them, I'm a writer and my book is coming out on Friday. Can I bring it in to you? And I told him what it was. And he said, "Oh my gosh, we don't have anything like that. Bring it in." I didn't have a single word written. I literally pitched the bookstore without having anything written. So when he said yes for Friday, I spent 3 days, spitting out this very DIY version of it out of my computer. It was 8.5 by 11. I took it to Kinko's because remember, this was before the internet. This was years ago. Oh. And, took it to, I don't even think Kinko's exists anymore. It's now FedEx. And, had it bound and took it to him. And he said, "Great, I'll take 25 copies for Monday." I was like, great. So I spent the weekend, getting all these things together, and they sold all 25 copies in 8 days. And I just realized I was onto something. And I, Vince, it is one of those things in my life that I feel so blessed that the idea came to me and I ran with it, and I ran with it before anybody else had done it. And that's what I believe has kept it here for so long, because there's now many different kind of organizers out there for actors and many different people who've addressed the business side and goal setting. But it's been interesting to watch this just, continue its growth and its climb all of these years, because those other people will come in and maybe take the market for a little bit, and then they either break up or the book goes out of print or whatever, and mine's still there. And so I feel very proud of that people have continued to buy it every year, because it's useful for a full year. Whenever you buy it, you can use it for a full year and then start your calendar over the next year. So that's been such a blessing in my life.
I can say that it has affected change in Pittsburgh and now across the world with this podcast, because we literally wouldn't be here if it weren't for you and your book. I can say that with full confidence.
Thank you so much.
I'll tell you, it seems like stumbling into these wonderful opportunities, or I should rephrase and say having the insight to notice when opportunity is knocking, has been a theme in your career.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Right. But it's a lot about knowing what you want, and it's a lot about knowing when to make a move. But tell us a little bit about Slow Burn and ending up on the Billboard charts.
Yeah, so this is, talk about just a crazy thing that came into my life. But going on what you said, it wasn't really so crazy. It's just sometimes a path that you go on takes you in a different place than you expected. So how Slow Burn came about was about 3 years ago, I decided that I wanted to launch into the commercial songwriting world. I've been writing for musical theater for much of my life, and decided, I thought, let's do this in the commercial world. If I can get some major artist to cut one of my songs, that can be a whole other thing and a whole other passive income stream for my acting career, quite honestly. And as I got into it, I started working with, somebody introduced me to a gentleman named Joe Volpus, who is the man who started Lady Gaga's career. And I got introduced to him, and he really took a liking to me, and we started writing songs together, again, still just as a songwriter. And finally, when he realized that I was a big Broadway girl and a performer, he just posed the question, why aren't you being an artist? And I just had all the reasons why I wasn't. And then I would go to Nashville, because we were writing country music mostly, and I would go to Nashville and I would sing out at songwriter nights, and they'd be like, you have an amazing voice, why aren't you being an artist? And so I just started really thinking about it and thought, well, why aren't I? And so I happened to write Slow Burn for one of Joe's other artists and to pitch it to her. And I did the scratch demo for it. And at the end of the session, he was like, that was really incredible. I said, yeah, well, whatever, give it to your artist and see what happens. And the artist actually turned it down. She had too many choices for her record, and she turned it down even though she loved it. And the moment that happened, literally Joe and I called each other almost at the same time, and we're like, this is your single. And it was this, you're right. The word random is not really appropriate, because I think everything you do in your life leads you on a certain path. And so we decided to go for it 150%, and it's been greatly successful. So I'm just thrilled.
I mean, the video is sexy. It's wise. The message is mature. The music is great. Really, there's not a lot to say in any negative way about it. It's a wonderful piece.
Well, thank you so much. And the video, was so fun for me to get to do that, because that was when I got to really pull out all of my background in theater, and I got to reach out to my theater friends and get them involved to be, dancers in it. And it was one of those days, because I storyboarded the video, I hired everybody, I found the locations, I styled it, I did everything, and hired a video team from Nashville to come to New York to do it. And it was so wonderful to know that I had the capacity to have all those different skills, and then to assemble a team that allowed me to just be the artist on the day of the recording, because it's also me obviously in it. Mm-hmm. And so that was really great to have been able to handle all of those aspects of that video, and then know that I got the right people so that I could just be the artist that day. And it was just one of the best days of my life filming that.
There's an awesome dance break. You guys have to check it out. I watched the video on Google Play, and I watched it on YouTube because I wanted to Chromecast it to my television.
Oh, nice.
Leslie, tell us where we can get your single if somebody wants to purchase it. And I'm also going to get to your EP in a second.
Sure. Well, you can find all of my music on iTunes. You can always go straight to my music website, which is lesliebeckermusic.com, and that'll lead you right to where you can purchase all of my music. I have a second single called Confidential, which is again in the pop world, and then I just released a country single called Boy Toy, and then I have a country EP that I did. That was the first thing I did, and that's actually not me as an artist. That was my EP featuring Nashville artists singing songs that I wrote. But those are all four of those are available. And then I'm working right now on completing my EP as an artist in the pop or hot adult contemporary market. So
I think it's wise. I think there's room to strike there for sure.
Thank you.
Also, before we get too far removed from the Organized Actor, why don't you let us know where we can pick that up as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That is at organizedactor.com. And if you're in New York or Los Angeles, you can always get it at Drama Bookshop here in New York, and Samuel French in Los Angeles, in those two main bookstores, or on the website. That's the best way to do it. And, there's still some people who order it through Amazon, but it's a lot quicker if you order it directly from me, because I'm the one filling the orders, or if you walk into a bookstore and do it. So, so that's where you can find it.
It's a game changer. So
Thank you.
We were talking about you being a performer and having all these skill sets and your awesome dance break. Do you have a favorite credit on your resume?
Oh gosh, yes. This last year, 2015, was one of my probably one of my best years as an actor. I worked 48 of the 52 weeks, which
Wow.
that alone is enormous. And two of the roles that I had coveted for a very long time, I finally got to do. One was to play Mother in Ragtime, and the other one was to play Mrs. Wilkinson and Billy Elliot. And I got to do both of those in the same year on like bookended those with a Broadway show in the middle. So last year was a really huge year for me in theater. Very grateful for that. And that led to me, being able to do this music this year. So very blessed to have gotten those two really key roles that I'd been wanting for a long time. So that was great.
And they're really, I mean, useful whenever, as somebody who casts, they're useful. When I look at your resume, I'm like, I know exactly how to use her right now. But tell me a little bit about, so one of my favorite musicals is on your resume, and I have to say that going forward. But tell me about Nine. How awesome was that? You played some awesome roles in that show. You understudied another awesome role.
Yeah, that was probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. That was my Broadway debut. And pretty cool to debut with Antonio Banderas and, Jane Krakowski and all these amazing stars. And I was hired because once the show opened, they realized they had not properly covered themselves, and that they basically had two girls to cover 17 women on stage. And so they hired me as an additional understudy. So I understudied 7 ensemble women and 3 principal women. So it was probably the hardest I've ever worked. And I went on for, I went on for 8 of the 10 roles that I covered in the 9 months that I was in the show, including the role that Cheetah Rivera played. I went on in that role and the other principal roles that I played. And it was, the hardest job, very rewarding, very challenging. And, first show out, out of the gate, actually on Broadway. I'd done a lot of tours before that, but that was my Broadway debut.
I got to ask, you're in the wing. It's, 7:58. You're about to go on as Cheetah Rivera's understudy. What is going through your mind right then?
It was kind of insane, and I have to say, at that point, this was later in the show. So Cheetah had left, and it was now Eartha Kitt who was playing that role, which I knew Eartha because Eartha and I had starred together in Cinderella a couple of years before. So it was actually kind of cool to get to be going on for her because we already knew each other. But the crazy part of it was it only happened because of a snowstorm. And Eartha lived about an hour out of town, and always a car picked her up, and they couldn't get out because of the snowstorm. And because, anybody of that caliber is above the title, they would not really tell me that I was going to be on until 8 p.m., like literally when the curtain's going up. So even though I was in costume and in regalia, they basically said, if Eartha walks in this next 30 seconds, she will go on. And I was like, I get it. That's what I'm here for, whatever. And so, finally it was like 5 of, and they were like, okay, you're going on. And, my response was like, oh, really? Like, I didn't know that. So it was incredibly exciting and a really cool thing to have gotten to do.
I will tell you, our literary manager is going to faint when he hears this. He is the biggest Batman Eartha Kitt fan. Like,
oh my gosh.
He's going to go crazy for that.
Yeah, and she was she was an amazing woman. And, we lost her a few years back. And to have, known her on 2 shows and become friends with her, she really was quite an extraordinary woman. Very brave and I can't believe that my life crossed paths with her and that I could call her a friend and we'd go have lunch together. I mean, that's amazing.
That actually is a wonderful question that I was interested in asking you. I didn't know if it would come up. How do you feel about the sort of controversy that Cameron McIntosh brought about by saying he will not allow understudies to be announced prior to the curtain?
Yeah, there's I always approach things from a business side, Vince, too. So I see both sides of it. From the business side, what that is when somebody is above the title, if they are out that night, technically they have to refund tickets. So if some star name is going on and they're not there, it means that anybody can get up and walk out of the theater and ask for their tickets back because they might have come to see that star. Mm-hmm. So that side of it I get. But, an understudy, the equity rule is that it has to be in the program. And the only way it has to be announced is if for some reason it happened at such a last minute that they couldn't put it in the program. You know how they slip those little pieces of paper to say, whatever. So, yeah, it's kind of it's a double-edged sword, but no matter what, an actor, obviously an understudy going on has to be, has to be announced in some form, whether that be in paper form or, or in an audio announcement. And I got to be honest, as having been an understudy, it's way better to have it be a paper in the program, because that moment, literally when you're standing behind the curtain and they say, and in the role of so-and-so will be played by this person, you hear the audience go, oh, you hear that. And so it's probably better for the understudy that they don't make a verbal announcement.
I totally agree with you. And I agree with your point as a whole, but I also agree with probably the paper versus the announcement.
Yes.
It's hard to sit here as a producer because it's been a topic of discussion among these parts at 12 Peers. Not that we have understudies frequently, but it's definitely something we all have an opinion on. And I tend to be towards the middle, seeing it again as a performer and now as a producer. Yeah. And, I got to be honest, I've been an understudy a lot, and I've been in shows where sometimes the understudies are better than the person playing the role. And that's, the understudy, just because it's an understudy doesn't mean they're not good. They're usually really, really good. And sometimes they are better, or, they bring a freshness to it because they're not doing it every night. So it's extremely rare, certainly at the Broadway level, that you go to a show and you see an understudy and you're like, oh, that person was bad. That doesn't happen. I mean, people are awesome. I 100% agree with you on that. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Is there a production in, let's say, the past 10 years that you wish you would have seen?
Well, I haven't seen Hamilton yet because I can't get a ticket because they're $600, and I try to play the lottery every day and I've yet to win.
I think I'm going to stop asking that question because Hamilton is everyone's response.
Yeah, but the other one that would be my response was, I'm really bummed that I missed Boy from Oz with Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, that was like 2002 or something?
Probably around there. Yeah. I was out on tour and did not see that, and I would have loved to, because people just said he was astronomically amazing in that.
So do you have a production that you did see that was earth-shattering, life-changing, monumental in some way?
Absolutely. My number one still to this day, my favorite, I have two favorite theatrical experiences. One was Andrew Lippa's Wild Party. And I say Andrew Lippa's because there was also John LaCusa's that was on Broadway, at the same time. And it made Andrew Lippa's off-Broadway production go away because there was another one of the same, show, a different interpretation of it happening at the same time, which is completely random that happened. But Andrew Lippa's Wild Party is still, to this day, a score that I listen to all the time, a CD that is always in my playlist. It was one of my favorite theatrical experiences. My second one was more recent, a one-man play/musical/life autobiography called The Lion with my friend Benjamin Schuer. And
he's fantastic and the sweetest guy.
Oh my gosh. It was in more recent years, one of the most breathtaking things I have ever seen.
Yeah, he closed the City Theater season last year with it. I had a chance to meet him. He's just the most honest, beautiful person. I was very moved by that show.
He's extraordinary. And I had actually a really cool experience because about 2 or 3 weeks ago, usually on Monday nights, I sing out at a place called Cafe Vivaldi here in New York. It's an open mic, and people of all different levels come in and sing their new songs. And in walks Ben. And, here, I think of him as someone who doesn't need to be at open mics. And here he is, doing his gig as an artist. But when I saw him, I realized that I had this moment of realization that he's the reason that I am commercial songwriting and ultimately led to Slow Burn, because what led me to starting to write commercial country music was he and I were at Goodspeed together for the New Musicals Festival of shows that we'd written. And we had to present a cabaret that was featuring music that was not just the musical that we'd written. And I met Ben up there and said, well, I think if I sang this country song I wrote a cappella, would you be able to put the chords on your guitar? And he was like, sure. And so I sang it a cappella, and then he just put the chords and we were singing together. And I was like, you're going to sing this with me at the cabaret. And after the cabaret, people came up to me and said, "What is that song? You have to do something with that." And that's when my whole commercial songwriting career started. That's a Ben story.
That is, it's such a small world.
It's crazy.
Well, that's a great segue. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the music? You wrote the books and lyrics, correct?
I wrote the book and lyrics to the musical that is happening. It's getting its world premiere in March of 2017 at the Village Theater in Issaquah, Washington. It is called A Proper Place. I write book and lyrics. It is based on a J.M. Barrie play called The Admirable Crichton. And the best way to describe it is imagine if Downton Abbey met Gilligan's Island.
Awesome.
That's the short version, and the a little bit longer version is that an upper British class family gets shipwrecked on an island, and the butler is the only one who knows how to help them survive, and so he becomes the head of the island, and they become his servants. And so it's an entire view of class structure, and is the class structure you are born into the one that you belong in, or if you're taken into another society, would you actually be a different person? And so it's very on the top level. It is very funny British humor, and in the depths of it is a real look at who we are as humans and the structures that we put on ourselves based on what we are born into, which is quite telling for like right now, where class structure is becoming something that Americans never really have dealt with, and now class is becoming more of an issue. There's a lot of talk about middle class and upper class where there never was before. And so it's very timely piece.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things about musicals is that we can have this top level, enjoyable evening of comedy, but you leave with something a little deeper than just the tunes you're humming.
Yeah, definitely. And, our director, Jerry Dixon, is really wonderful because he's really been the one to illuminate how really, even though this is a story based in 1902 England, how really very perfect it is for the time that we're in right now, and kind of relating where America is right now compared to where they were then. So it's really quite apropos for what's happening in our world.
Who wrote the music, if you don't mind my asking?
Of course. His name is Curtis Rhodes. He's my collaborator. He's in Los Angeles, so we do a lot of Skyping. And then my family is actually all from Los Angeles, so I go out to visit my family and always get in a session with Curtis, and he comes out here. So, we've found a way to make it work, and so it's great.
It's always challenging for the people I know who specifically write book and lyrics to find a writing partner who has the style and feel that they're looking to achieve with their piece.
Yes.
What was the how did you meet, and what's aside from the traveling back and forth and the Skyping, what comes first? I hate to ask that. It's such a cheesy question. What comes first, the music or the lyrics?
It's so not a cheesy question. It's like, I think the one that any established songwriting team gets that, question asked. But a little bit of the history of Curtis and me. So Curtis and I'm originally from LA, and Curtis and I knew each other from all those years ago. We actually started writing A Proper Place well over 20 years ago. And we were kids, and while we had the passion and the drive, and we, certainly had levels that we knew what we were doing because we were both actors and performers, he was the one who came to me with the project. He actually was doing an evening of songs that he'd written as a composer and asked me to be a singer, to play one of the roles in these 3 songs from this show that he'd started. And I said, sure, I'll do that. And then when I heard all 3 songs, I was like, this is amazing. What is this? And he told me what it was. And I said, well, I'd love to help you. And at that time, I was very much in my business mind of doing marketing and things for people. I said, I'd love to help you get this out in the world. He said, well, what I'm really looking for is a lyricist. And I said, well, I haven't written lyrics, but I've been published as a poet. Would you let me try it? And he gave me a piece of music, and it just worked. And so, that was a long time ago, and we put it on a shelf for 15 years because we weren't ready back then and the world wasn't ready for it. And flash forward 3 years ago, I called him out of the blue, having not really had any contact with him for all those years, and said, because of Downton Abbey, I think this is the time to go back to doing this. And it just was the right time. And then to have, 20 plus years experience on either side for each of us. And, we'd each written other musicals now in that time. we knew what to do with it. And the development trajectory in these last 3 years has been so incredibly fast. We immediately, I produced a full industry reading here in New York 3 years ago. A producer saw it that wanted to take it to the new festivals at Goodspeed Opera House. A few months later, we got the Goodspeed New Musicals Festival at the Village Theater. And then ultimately, the Village Theater offered us a full main stage production. So it really has happened so quick once we went back to it 3 years ago.
So rapid fire, 3 tips for goal setting for young artists.
Number 1, decide what you want. Number 2, believe it's possible. Number 3, go out and do it. It is really that simple. It doesn't mean those steps are easy, but it is that simple. You just have to decide what you want, believe it's possible, and go out and do it. That's the best thing that I can do. You can talk about it. You can talk until you're blue in the face, but until you take action on it, nothing is going to happen. So whatever is your heart's desire, look at it, say, I really want that, and I believe I can get it, and then go make it happen.
That is sound business advice. It really is. I mean, it's so easy. We get a good feeling by thinking about all the good we're going to do in the world. It's really easy to stop with that good feeling as opposed to actually doing it.
Right. Because, everybody has, I think everybody, I'd like to believe that most people have good intention, but intention doesn't pay the bills. Doing the work and making it happen is what is going to make your life happen.
Absolutely. All right, so that's business side. What's your biggest piece of artistic advice for someone who maybe wants to end up on a national tour or on Broadway, or someone who wants to have their musical done at the Village Theater?
Yeah, number 1 is do the work. I think that because the conversation has become so much about the business, and you have to approach whatever art you're pursuing as a business, but you can't let the artist go. That is a fine line balance, because there are people that are brilliant at marketing themselves, but they get in the room and they can't show the goods. And, the bottom line is, particularly in the acting world, it doesn't matter how great a photo you have or what great audition songs you have or how big you can talk about yourself. It's what you do in the room that matters. And so you've got to do the work. You have to focus on the necessary work as an artist. It is like a hand-in-hand thing. You can't do too much art and not any business, and you can't do it the other way either. There's just a merging of those two things, and they're crucial, both of them.
Yeah, they absolutely support each other, because once you understand that the work in the room is your brand in a lot of ways,
totally,
they come together and dance very nicely together.
Yeah, and I had a realization that I kind of put into words, and this just came a couple of years ago, is realizing that the only real thing that matters is what you do in the room and what they're saying about you after you leave.
Yes.
I mean, that is like the basic that I just kind of a couple of years ago was like, ooh, yeah, that's what it is. That is exactly what it is. And so if you can master all of that, then you're going to have a huge career.
And it's interesting because when I was acting primarily, I was always worried about if they liked me or didn't like me.
Sure, we all are.
But as a producer, I can tell you that if we don't like you, we don't think about you and we don't talk about you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the worst thing. So you got to make them talk. It's going to be good if they're talking.
It's true. And you now, having been behind the desk, you realize that the people behind the desk, I mean, they really want you to be brilliant, because they want you to, when we're on the other side of the desk, we want that person to walk in and be that role. We're like looking for that person. And so we're 150% behind the actor, wanting them to be brilliant. And I think that's something as an actor that we don't often remember when we're suddenly in the room as an actor again. That, the people on the other side of the desk really want us to succeed, because we can fill a job. They're looking for us to walk in and be brilliant.
I owe you royalties on that statement. I've said it so many times. I got it from you, and because we have a problem to solve, and we're begging. We're dying for you to be brilliant.
Totally, and I will take that royalty check. When's that arriving?
It's already in the mail, Leslie. Don't worry about
Excellent.
it. So, I believe, and I know we've promoted Organized Actor because I just feel strongly about the project, but I believe we talked about a discount for any of our peers out there listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to offer a $5 discount. So it usually sells for $20, and I'm going to do $15. And what I'm going to do is give you a link. I don't know if you're able to attach that to the podcast, but it'll be a direct link to that discount.
Yeah, you guys can find that link in the description below.
Great. So that way anybody who, listens to the podcast has access to that special link.
And I'll tell you, do yourself a favor, get yourself a goal, get yourself a deadline, get yourself a plan, and just go start doing it one thing at a time. The first step is getting the organized actor from Leslie Becker.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, and it's a weird full circle. Full disclosure, I actually paid Leslie to coach me. I bought literally almost every product on her website. I found out about Leslie when I was in college, and full disclosure from me to my audience, but it's such a cool full circle thing to have you come on the show. I can't believe it.
Well, I'm honored to be here. And just as I said before we got on the official part of this call, I'm just so proud of you to see what you've accomplished, because I remember the conversations we were having about you wanted to start a theater company, and I just am thrilled for you. So many congratulations to you. And I'm honored to get to be on this podcast.
Well, excellent. Thank you for joining us, and catch us next time on the Modern Myths podcast. And that was our interview with Leslie Becker. We hope you picked up a few tips and tricks, or just had a good time listening to Leslie's stories. Also, if you're a playwright who's looking for an extra edge, we are still partnering with Ken Davenport over at The Producer's Perspective, and he is offering personalized script coverage. You can find all the details over at our website, www.12peerstheater.org. Well, that's all we have for today. We hope you'll join us next time for the next play in our podcast series, It's Just Something That Happened. And also, if you love 12 Peers, if you love the Modern Myths podcast, be sure to subscribe so that new episodes are delivered automatically to you, either on iTunes or your favorite podcast provider. Also, while you're there, leave us a review and rate us. Every little bit helps in that respect. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always head over to 12peerstheater.org and make a donation to support 12 Peers Theater. As always, thanks for listening.